Turkish military convoy headed to Khan Sheikhoun targeted in Idlib by Syria regime bombing. A Turkish military convoy which crossed into northwest Syria on Monday to head for the observation points near the key town of Khan Sheikhoun, where Assad regime forces are fiercely battling opposition groups, came under attack of regime jets. The route of the convoy, which included additional troops and vehicles to be deployed in No. 9 observation point in Mork and No. 10 observation point in Zawiya, was hit in airstrikes, Demiroran news agency, the, said, adding that the convoy was stopped in a safe location. On Sunday, pro-regime forces entered Khan Sheikhoun in Idlib province for the first time since they lost control of it in 2014. The advance not only threatens the town, in opposition hands since 2014, but also to encircle insurgent fighters in their only patch of territory in neighboring Hama province. Regime forces are battling to seize a key highway connecting regime-held Damascus with the northern city of Aleppo, which the regime retook from opposition groups in December 2016. Pro-regime forces arrived at the northwest flank of the town under heavy airstrikes and were fighting to march into it, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said. Residents said warplanes pounded the town and nearby positions during the night. The roads in the countryside between Khan Sheikhoun and Ma'arat al-Yaman, a major town located some 20 kilometers north. Turkey has 12 observation posts in Idlib, the last major opposition stronghold in the war-torn country. One of the observation points is about 10 kilometers south of Khan Sheikhoun in the Mork district. If fighting in the area expands, the Mork observation point could face a siege. Ankara backs moderate opposition groups in the northwest and has deployed forces into the Idlib region under Astana peace process deal with Russia, Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad's most powerful ally, and Iran, which backs the regime through militia on the ground. The Idlib region is supposed to be protected from a massive regime offensive by a buffer zone deal signed between Russia and Turkey in September. But it was never fully implemented, as terrorist groups including the al-Qaeda-linked Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly known as the Nusra Front, refused to withdraw from the planned demilitarized zone and instead increased their grip in the region. The Turkish Defense Ministry issued a statement Monday saying that 3 civilians were killed and 12 more were wounded in the airstrikes targeting the convoy. Despite repeated warnings we made to the authorities of the Russian Federation, the military operations by the regime forces continue in Idlib region in violation of the existing memorandums and agreements with the Russian Federation, causing great harm to the civilian innocent people and gradually turning into a humanitarian drama, the statement said. In the face of these ongoing operations in violation of all memorandums and agreements threatening the supply route to the Turkish observation point No. 9, a deployment of our forces was started on August 19, 2019 at 5:30 a.m. with advance information supplied to the Russian Federation, in order to keep the supply routes open, to ensure the safety of our observation post, and to prevent further loss of civilian innocent lives in the region. During the transit, an airstrike launched on our convoy at 8:55 a.m. caused 3 civilians to lose their lives and left 12 civilians wounded. We strongly condemn this attack, which contradicts the existing agreements, cooperation and dialogue with the Russian Federation. Without prejudice to our rights to self-defense, we expect the necessary measures to be taken to prevent recurrence of such incidents. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, a Britain-based war monitor, reported Syrian regime and Russian airstrikes aimed at hindering the convoy's advance through Idlib province. A witness said a Turkish military convoy, with opposition allies, entered Idlib on Monday, but was stopped because of heavy bombing there. The Assad regime slammed the action. Turkish vehicles loaded with munitions are heading toward Khan Sheikhoun to help the terrorists, a foreign ministry source quoted by the state news agency SABAH said. The latest fighting, which broke out overnight Saturday to Sunday, has already killed at least 59 opposition fighters as well as 28 members of pro-regime forces, the observatory said. Colonel Mustafa Bakir of the Jaish al-Islam opposition faction said battles raged on the outskirts of the town. Fighters arrived to reinforce the front line, he said, including some from the National Army, a Turkey-backed opposition group based further north near the border. On Sunday, regime forces retook the village of Tel El Nur and nearby farmland northwest of Khan Sheikhoun before closing in on the town, observatory head Rami Abdelrahman said. They then advanced into the northwestern districts of the town amid ferocious resistance from opposition groups, he said. Terrorist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham Heights, led by Syria's former al-Qaeda affiliate, carried out several suicide bombings to slow the advance of regime troops, Abdelrahman added. Heights controls most of Idlib province as well as parts of the neighboring provinces of Hama, Aleppo and Latakia. Since a brief ceasefire collapsed this month, the Syrian regime army has closed in on Khan Sheikhoun from the east and west. Regime and Russian airstrikes and shelling since late April have killed more than 860 civilians, according to the observatory, which relies on sources inside Syria for its information. On Sunday, airstrikes by the Syrian regime and its ally Russia killed 2 people, including a child, in the south of Idlib, the observatory said. More than 1,400 insurgents and over 1,200 pro-regime forces have been killed since April, according to the Monitor. Hundreds of thousands of Syrian civilians have fled toward the Turkish border, the United Nations says. Khan Sheikhoun, along the M5 highway stretching from the capital Damascus to Aleppo city, was bombed with sarin in 2017, an attack that killed dozens of people, wounded hundreds of others, and prompted a U.S. missile strike. An investigation by the United Nations and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons blamed the attack on the Syrian regime. Damascus denies using such weapons. Now almost emptied of inhabitants, Khan Sheikhoun sheltered almost 100,000 people before the start of the current military escalation, the majority displaced from Hama province. Many of these people have been displaced up to 5 times, the UN's regional spokesman for the Syria crisis, David Swanson, told AFP on Saturday. Ongoing clashes, shelling and airstrikes, including the use of barrel bombs, continue unabated and have damaged schools and hospitals, he added. The 3-month campaign of airstrikes and shelling has killed more than 2,000 people on both sides. Mostly civilians in Idlib were killed by the regime and Russian airstrikes and causing the displacement of almost 400,000 people. The United Nations says dozens of health centers and schools have been targeted. The refugee wave from Idlib toward the Turkish border, which was triggered by the regime advance, continued yesterday as thousands more left their home. Speaking to Anadolu Agency, Mohammed Erlak, president of the Syria Intervention Coordinators, said that Khan Sheikhoun is completely devastated by regime attacks targeting civilian areas since February. 8 schools, 3 medical centers, a civil defense center, and 3 bakeries have been targeted in regime and Russian airstrikes, he said. Erlak added that Khan Sheikhoun's population, which was nearly 100,000 before the offensive, has currently dwindled to almost 0. Syria's conflict has killed more than 370,000 people and displaced millions at home and abroad since starting with the brutal repression of anti-regime protests in 2011.